In this section and in a few other sections coming, we are going to learn how spreadsheet software helps you analyze data and make business decisions. You'll become familiar with the different elements of a spreadsheet and learn your way around the Excel program. So the question is, what is Microsoft Excel and what is spreadsheet software? Microsoft Excel is the electronic spreadsheet program that comes with Microsoft Office, with the Microsoft Office suite. An electronic spreadsheet, or a spreadsheet, is an application that you use to perform numeric calculations and to analyze and present numeric data. One advantage of a spreadsheet is over pencil and paper is that your calculations are updated automatically and you can change entries without having to recalculate them manually. So some of the abilities or what you can do with Excel, as you'll see later in these sessions, are entering data quickly and accurately, recalculating your data easily, performing what's called what if analysis. So what if I sold twice as many units? What would be the profit, for example? And then how to change the appearance of information, create charts, and use the different functions and formulas in Excel. So let's get started here. So basically, like I said, Microsoft Excel, it's part of the Office suite. So to get to it, you go under Programs, and then you go under Microsoft Office, and then you'll pick Microsoft Excel. As soon as you open Microsoft Excel, you'll be presented with these similar window, just like you're used with Microsoft Word. This is the Office ribbon, and I'm not going to go through all the settings here and all the things here, but you have the Home tab with the most common stuff, common functions within this application. Then you go under Insert, where you can insert different additional components, Formatting, the page layout, and then Formulas. This is kind of different from what you might have been used in Microsoft Word and other applications, because it deals with calculations. And then you have Data as well, a Data tab, getting data from other systems and other sources, and Review, View, and Add-ins. So it's pretty much very similar. It's using the Office ribbon. That's the concept to keep in mind at this point. It's using the Office ribbon, which is same as in Microsoft Word and other Office applications. Then what you have right below the ribbon is also, this is the function toolbar, or where you enter your different functions and formulas where they are displayed. And then right below this is what our spreadsheet or worksheet, actually the worksheet view is. And I'll cover those in a few seconds here. Now notice in the bottom here there are 3 different sheets here that are by default as you enter or as you create a new spreadsheet in Excel. Think of those just like pages of a notebook, and you can do calculations on the first sheet and then link those calculations with other items in the second one and third one. And you can create new worksheets by simply clicking on this Insert Worksheet component right here. So notice I inserted a worksheet 4. Now you can also rename those worksheets, so you could just, let's say you are dealing with different months of the year, and these are just some of the basic concepts here. Just right click, choose rename, and then you could call it, for example, January. So you can get the idea here on adding other sheets. And as far as the number of rows and columns here, you basically can insert up to 1 million rows and 16,000 columns. So what are some of the other components here? Notice that as you open any of these worksheets, by the way, this is misspelled here. Notice you have these numbers, 1, and it keeps on going. Basically, it will keep on going all the way to the 1 million if you keep on scrolling here. And then you have those columns, so the letters A, B, C, D, and so on. So those can go up to 16,000 columns. So you have the rows and the columns here. Now, wherever you click here in the worksheet, that is referred to as the active cell. And the active cell has usually an address. So the address for this cell where I have clicked right now, it would be where the column meets with the row here. So this would be B3. This next one, it would be D6. That'll be F6. And notice it also displays it right here. So the concept so far is that you have the rows and the columns. It's going to have quite a few of them. Each one of them has an address. Now in these cells, you can add different type of data. You can insert in here, and notice the type of data that you can insert. It could be a general number or general type of data, no specific format. It could be a number, currency. It could be a counting format type of numbers. It could be a date or a percentage, fraction, or text. So basically, remember, this is, you can put text here, numbers, percentages, and formulas. We'll cover the formulas shortly as well, but all formulas in Excel start with the equal sign. So that's an example of a formula, by the way, and we'll get into that shortly. So that's it basically on just getting started very briefly with Excel, the different components of the interface and the different worksheets here. These are referred to as the worksheet. The actual file, when you save it, that is referred to as a spreadsheet made up of the different workbooks. So next we'll go into some of the actual entering of the data and doing some of the basic calculations in Excel. Welcome back. In this section I'm going to cover some of the basic functions in using Excel. Those will be some of the functions such as adding a bunch of numbers, finding the maximum number, the average, counting a bunch of numbers, and subtracting and multiplying and so on. Some of those basic arithmetic concepts that you have learned, those come in very handy in here in Excel, and you'll use them constantly as you plan on using Excel. So let's get started. Basically, the functions, you'll say, well, where are the functions? How many of them are there? So if you click here on the tab Formulas and you click on Insert Functions, you'll see a listing of all the functions if you choose this drop down here. And there are hundreds and hundreds of those functions. We'll not cover anywhere close to most of them. We'll actually just touch some of the basic stuff here in Excel, because basically Excel, it's endless in what you can learn and what you can do with it. So for example, the sum function that we were talking about and using earlier, it is listed somewhere in here. And there it is. For example, sum, it adds all the numbers in a range. You can add those numbers like number 1, comma, number 2, comma, number 3, but if you have a long range, then you'd use the colon to determine the starting point and the end point and everything in between. So that's pretty much the stuff on the concept and the function. So it's, the idea here is that it's a lot of them, it's hundreds of them, and to understand them better, you can click right here under the insert function, and then also if you click on help on this function, Microsoft will bring up the help menu or the help guides on how to use this function with examples and things of that nature. Keep in mind as well that all these functions work the same across any other types of spreadsheet software out there. So there it gives you the example. So let's go back. Now let's say we want to find the maximum number, the highest number in this range. So what we do is, we remember that all formulas start with the equal sign. So we type equal, and then we want to get the maximum number. So you'd say, well, how do I know what the function for maximum is? You could either click on insert function here under formulas and then insert function, or you could just take a guess at it and do just max, for example. And notice Excel gives you a listing of close matches to it. So now we'll choose, for example, max, and it tells you that it returns the largest value in a set of values. So if we choose max here, and then we want the range to be these guys over here, this range, and then hit enter. So we could have typed that C5 colon C13, and notice the highest number here is the number 500. If I change one of those numbers to 788 and hit enter, notice this will be updated automatically as well. All of these other references as well to it. So for example, this got changed, this number here and that, and also the total back here. Now, if I wanted to find the minimum, the lowest number, then you do the same thing. So you do equal, and then you try, for example, minimum, MIN. And notice the first one that gets recommended from Microsoft is MIN. So those actually you kind of have to remember them. It works the same in OpenOffice and the other applications as well. So we choose MIN. Notice it's doing the parentheses, and then we select the range. We want to find the lowest number in this range. Then hit enter, and the lowest number is number 13. Now you'd say, what about the average? What's the average of all these numbers here? So for the average, you just do again equal sign, and then you type average, or you start typing part of the average. Notice it's not a short way like AVG, so in this case it is the whole word. It gives you the average or the arithmetic mean of its arguments, or of the numbers that are included in the range. For example, this would be the range right here. Then we hit enter, and that is the average. Now, what about counting them? So you do the equal sign, count. By the way, for any of those, instead of doing them manually, you could go to the Home tab. So let's go back here, under the Home tab, and there is this section right here under the Editing option. And you choose drop down here, and then you choose Count Numbers. That's another function. But I'd like to have you use it manually to understand the concept behind it, because those menus again could change. So if we click on Count Numbers here, notice it's going to try to count these numbers automatically right here. But we're not interested in those, we are interested in those from 5 through 13, C5 through C13. We select the new range, hit enter, and notice there are 9 numbers included in there, 9 records. So instead of you counting those manually, you'd count them using a formula. So now the question is, how can I have these, instead of me spending all afternoon or day entering these formulas for the other ranges, and you could have hundreds of those, how can I replicate these numbers so that they actually, or those formulas here, how can I replicate those formulas so that what I have in this here, it would also be the same on these other columns? So the way to do that, if you remember before, when we did this, we just dragged it to the right. So we could simply do this first one. Notice this is the formula up here. We could drag it to the right, and it works. Now, by the way, anytime you drag this stuff to the right, you need to verify that the correct stuff is being calculated, the correct formula. So if you click on the formula bar up here, notice it selects, it tells you in blue what's being selected. So that's one of the ways. So you can click on it, drag it to the right. Now another way to do this easier is select the whole range here, a whole bunch of stuff, and then click on the bottom right, and then drag it to the right. And now notice it does it for all the records in the spreadsheet, or in that range that we are picking. So what's happening is, as you drag it to the right, notice on the first one it's C5 through C13. When we click on the next one, it's D5 through D13. So it's shifting one over in a sequence, very similar to like the days of the week that we tried earlier, and the months of the year, and so on. So that's relative referencing. So that's some of the basic functions here that we learned so far, is to add a bunch of numbers. So to find the total for a bunch of numbers, or the sum of the total bunch of numbers. To find the highest number, maximum, minimum number, the lowest number, the average, and counting. So it's just 5 functions so far. Now, a lot of times in business, you'll also do other mathematical calculations such as addition, subtracting numbers, multiplying a bunch of numbers, and then dividing. So addition in Excel, it's represented usually by using the sum function, sum or the plus sign. So you could have a bunch of couple numbers within parentheses and you use a plus between those two references. And we tried so I would recommend that you use the sum function for that, just like we did over here. Subtraction, it's usually just the minus sign on the keyboard. Multiplication, it's the asterisk, the shift and 7 in a Windows PC. Actually, it's shift and number 8 in Windows PC. And then dividing, it's by a slash, represented by just simply typing a slash here. So in our case here we have another example. Let's say that we have these employees. This is their pay. They have to pay different deductions. Deduction number 1, deductions number 2. So now we want to calculate the total of those deductions. So we have deduction 1 and deduction 2, and that will give us the total of these deductions. So what we do here is we press the equal sign, and then we put sum, open parentheses, and then just pick those two cells. Hit enter, and it is $289, for example. Now, in this case, you'd say, well, why didn't I do the equal sign or the plus sign here? The reason why you don't want to do the plus sign is because at some point between deduction 1 and deduction 2, you might insert a new column, and then whatever that new column that you insert is going to be part of your new range. So now what you do is, notice there is also a warning here that says the formula in this cell refers to a range that is additional adjacent to it. So it's basically saying, hey, you might have forgotten to include this one over here, but we're not interested in that because we're doing something else at this point. We just want to add the deductions. So now if you wanted to add all of these deductions together, all you do is you use the autofill feature. And actually that's not adding them together, it's basically replicating that same formula in the other cells. So again, I clicked on it and I dragged it down. And notice those have been represented. So that for this guy that is making $9,000 a month, he has to pay $693 in deductions. Now, if we wanted to figure out what his net pay is, what we would do here is that we need to basically take his gross pay minus the deductions. So what we do in this case is the equal sign, and then we choose the payment minus the deductions. And then we hit enter. So again, what we did, equal sign, the first number, first value, the total pay, minus the deductions. And then we can replicate this using the autofill feature. So the net pay for Bill is, instead of getting $9,000, he's actually getting only $8,375. So now what we'll do is, let's say we want to figure out the annual income for him or for any of those employees. So what we do is, let's say we want to figure out the annual net pay. Usually it's the gross pay that you calculate, but let's say for now we want to include the annual one. So the annual would be the monthly times 12. So the way you put that in a formula is the equal sign, this number, the net pay, times 12. Usually it's not recommended that you encode in a formula actual numbers. However, this is the month of the year, so this is a round number, and it's most likely not going to change, but usually keep in mind you reference something. So it would be very similar to like saying annual. And then in another cell here you say it's going to be 12. So what you do in this case, instead of 12, you change that to be this value, L20. And if I hit enter, I still get the same value. So now let's drag this down using the autofill feature. And I'll actually explain this later why this did not work. So let's go back. I'll explain this on the absolute references in a little bit. So now it works. And the reason is because we are using an absolute reference. We are referring to this value here, and I'll explain that shortly. So the other thing that you can do here is let's go back to the values the way they were. So instead of using the reference, we'll use just 12 for simplicity and not being confused. So here is G12, that'll be annual net income. G23 times 12. Drag this down, and that's the net income for everyone. Now, let's get rid of these. Now let's say we wanted to divide this per week, so pay per week, so we can learn about division. So now the pay per week, remember this is the total for the annual, and we want to divide that for each week. So a year has 52 weeks. So what we do here is we press the equal sign, the number divided, so the annual income divided by 52, and then we hit enter. And the same, we can drag this down, and then the last one, Bill Allen, since he's making $90,000 or $100,000 a year, he is making around $2,000 a month, or actually per week here. So that's the division. Now keep in mind, for multiplication like we did here, and division and also subtraction, notice there is no function that you need to include, because for these other guys here, for these other references here, if you remember, we had to include the actual function, the max, and so on. For subtraction, multiplication, and dividing, you don't need to use those. And again, keep in mind that subtraction is the minus sign, multiplication the asterisk, and dividing is the slash. Welcome back to learning about Excel and some of the concepts in Excel. In this session, I'm going to cover some of the basic components and doing some basic calculations using Excel. What I have here is a predefined worksheet, or actually a spreadsheet with a bunch of worksheets. So notice I have one tab called Basic Calculations, Data Filtering, and all types of other stuff. So what I have on these cells is that I have different types of data. The data here is basically either text or numbers, so it's just a matter of typing something here in each one of those cells. Okay, so at this point, what we are going to do is we're going to figure out how to add those numbers up using a formula, because the benefit and the advantage of using Excel is the use of formulas. So here's one thing to keep in mind as you're dealing with spreadsheets. It doesn't matter what application you're using, they all pretty much use the same concept here. So usually all formulas in Excel start with the equal sign. That's how the computer knows that this what you're entering in there, it's a formula, it's going to be a calculation of some sort. Then there is the function. We'll learn about functions shortly. For example, sum. So it will be equal sign, SUM, and then the starting point for your range, so it could be B1 all the way through B10, and then close parentheses. So you have the equal sign, the function, then the starting point in your range, colon, and then the end point in your range. This is one of the key concepts. It's very important that we remember this in our study of Excel. So now let's go to, back to Excel here. So let's say we want to add all of these numbers up. There are a couple ways of doing it. One of them is by using the AutoSum function right here. But I want to show you how you can calculate and enter this calculation by using the formula. So like we said earlier, it starts with the equal sign. Then we start with the starting point, which is actually the next thing that we add here is sum, S-U-M, then open parentheses, and then we type C5 colon C13. So we want to start on C5 and then end on C13. Then we close parentheses. And then we hit enter. So the total of all of these numbers is 1386 at this point. Notice that's the formula that we are using. So that was one way to enter the formula. Now another way to enter the formula is by using the equal sign, the function, and then open parentheses, and then just drag the mouse over the range where you want to select the numbers. So from the starting point to the end, and then you let the mouse go. Then hit enter. And notice we get the same values. Now one other cool thing here with Excel is that, and this is where the power of Excel comes in, that you can change one of those values from 100 to 200, and notice what will happen as soon as I hit enter. It will change the total automatically. So the next thing what you can do here is, of course, you can use the automated calculation from here from the toolbar under the editing tab, and then in there, for example, we want to add all these numbers. You can click on auto sum here, or just click on the drop down and choose sum, and now Excel will try to figure out as to what you want to calculate. However, you have to be very careful as to what the program is selecting, because sometimes you may not want just like that way. You want it a different range. So that's why I wanted to show you the other method first, the manual way. So hit enter here, and this will be calculated and coming to 1972. The manual way, which is what I actually recommend to get used to this, is equal, the function, sum, and then select the range. Even the one that is blank, make sure you select it, because at some point you might add a number in there, and then it will give you the total here once we hit enter. So if I added something in that blank one, because I had it in the range, it's going to calculate correctly. So that's a couple ways of entering the formulas to add a bunch of numbers up. So again, equal, sum. Notice if you don't put the parentheses, what happens. So equal, sum, open parentheses, and select the range. Now you'd say, well, why can't I always use this drop down from here? The reason for that is because in the next version of Excel that might not be available, or in OpenOffice that might not be available, or in Google Docs if you're using the sheets in Google Docs, that may not be available the same way, like with the button there. So you need to know the logical way of how to do this. The other reason is because if I go and I want to put the total for this column back here, if I click on the auto sum, the computer does not know, or it's not picking the right range here. So notice it's picking these numbers. So what you can do is you can select the range with the mouse and then hit enter, and notice we have now the total back here. So the idea is that you can, in any cell, you can reference other cells. Again, you would not put each number manually here like 300, 500. Always put the reference for that number. So C5, the address, because you can change the numbers at any point, and then those values will be updated automatically. So now at this point, let's learn another trick here. So let's say that I wanted to put the totals for these other numbers in here. There's a feature called autofill here. So instead of you having to enter the formulas for each one of those, they're all exactly the same. What you can do is you hold the mouse on the bottom right, and when it changes to a little plus sign, the thin one, not the thick plus sign, so not like that, but this kind, then you drag it to the right, and that will give you the totals appropriately. And the way it works is that you can use this from left to right or from top and down. For example, if I wanted to get the total here, let's say I have the first formula here. So in this case, the formula would be equal. Let's say I wanted to get the total for training for all the months. I would have the equal sign, then the function sum, and then the starting range and the end range. So C3 through E5. Hit enter, notice it comes with 800. Instead of me entering these values or these formulas in every one of those cells, and sometimes you may have 100 cells or 200 or more, what you can do is you utilize the autofill feature. So all you do is you click on the cell that has the formula already in it, and then you drag it down after you click on the bottom right when the mouse changes to just a little plus sign, and then drag it down and then let it go. So notice all of those numbers now add up, for example, to 832. So that the concept here is using the autofill feature. The autofill feature comes in very handy for anything that is in a sequence. For example, if you want, let's say, to type the days of the week, and you want to fill those days in a sequence, instead of you having to type them manually, what you can do is just type the first day of the week and then drag it down. I guess this should have been Sunday, the first day of the week, so let's do Sunday, and then drag it down. If you wanted to do months of the year, so you type 1 and then drag it down. And you get the idea here. You can do it for numbers, you can do it for, actually for numbers you have to be cautious here. If you drag this down for actual numbers, by default it's leave it with the current number, but notice there is a drop down here under the autofill options, and you can choose autofill and then choose fill series, because it's seeing as numbers and it's basically giving you a chance to leave them alone the way number and just replicate it, or just go to the next number up. So you can choose fill series, and then it'll do what you probably were looking to do to start with. You can also use this feature, the autofill feature, by typing, let's say, things in a sequence. For example, 1 and 4. Let's say you want to have like 3 in between two numbers. What you do is you select that range, for example 1 and 4, those two cells, and then you drag this down together. So notice I had selected both of them, and now notice it says 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, and so on. So we had 3 in between those two numbers that we started with, and it gives us a sequence of it. So that's basically the autofill feature. So let me get rid of those quickly here. And let's get back to some of the formatting or different components here on the formatting of the text. As far as formatting of the text, it's actually pretty easy. Just like in Microsoft Word, you'll select the text and make it larger or smaller, just like in Word. You can also select a whole bunch of cells. Notice here, like it says using Excel, but it's kind of indented slightly to the left. You can select this whole range here and then go ahead and change it so that it merges all of those cells and it centers that component. So the concept that we are learning here is the actual merge and center. Now that we merged and centered it, you can make this font larger and customize it the way you want it. Notice there are also styles that you can use for those cells under the formatting here. Just like in Word, there are different styles. And here you can use, for example, heading 1 or title or something like that. So depending on what you want and how you want the style here. As far as formatting of the numbers, notice you can select these numbers, the range here, and then format them. There are some little quick access toolbar type of thing here regarding numbers or different commonly used tools. Or you can click on the drop down and let's say you want to format that as currency. So you click on currency here and it's going to put the dollar signs with the decimal points as well. As far as further formatting here, keep in mind that, like I said earlier, there is also the style formatting, so that would be the easiest to utilize, and you can pick any of those. Or you can format things manually by you selecting a range of cells and then changing here the background color to what you may be interested in. And I'll show you a little bit more on conditional formatting and that type of stuff briefly, shortly here in another one of those videos. Welcome back. In this session we are going to learn a little bit about references and the different types of references. There are 4 types of references. Most of the references that you use out there, they are what's called the relative references. If you notice here, we have the sum and then C5 through C13. When I drag this over, it replicated it. It went to D5 through D13, and then E5 and E13, and so on. So it's moving from one spot to the other in a relative way. So if you remember when we did the annual net income in this formula earlier, we had a problem when we referenced the number of months here via a formula. So for example, if we go here and use the autofill feature, notice to calculate the annual net income for these employees, notice it works. It gives us the correct values. However, if we go and delete this, and like I mentioned earlier, it's best to use references for calculating stuff. So let's say we want to get the net income, the net pay, for example, for a month for the first employee here is this value. And then if we wanted to calculate it based on a predefined value, for example, number of months or annual, so let's say 12 here, so it'll be that times 12, monthly income times 12, hit enter. Notice the first calculation is correct, and the reason is because we just entered it manually. You could do the same thing here for the second one. So you do equal the monthly times the number, and that will work. However, if you go and drag this down, that will not work. It will give you 0. So notice what's happening on the one that it's giving you a 0. It's multiplying G25 times this blank number here. So it's going 1 down and 1 down from our original place. Then we go to the next one. Notice it's going further down. It's going 3 down from our original place because we started here 1, 2, 3. So we started here 1, 2, 3, and now we are in the 4th spot. So that's why we are getting zeros. So what we are doing here is that these references, they are called relative references. So for example, this one right here, its reference or its address, it's L20, and that is not locked. If you were to make it an absolute reference, meaning stay put and locked down, what that'll do is, or the way you can do it as an absolute reference referring to this number of months, is by putting $signs here. So if you put $sign in front of it, in front of the L or the column, and in front of the row, and then hit enter here, it will still be the same number. However, when you use the autofill feature, notice those calculations will be correct because it's locked on L20. We are telling it, the system, not to go down here on L. Now you'd say, well, why would I want to use a point of reference here? Well, the idea here is that you would say, well, if I want to hire this guy for 6 months or these guys for 6 months, then what would be their annual salary? So you could just simply change this to 6, hit enter, and all of these numbers will be updated automatically. So that's the advantage, that instead of you having to go to the formula and tinkering with the number of months manually for each one of them, you just have a single point of reference. You change that to 11 months or whatever, and that is updated automatically. And that's the beauty of Excel. So here technically you could put sum or total. You put the sum of all these, and then at any point you can know, so let's say I want to hire them for 18 months, what your expenses will be. Here's another example. If we go to this other tab and notice, let's say you have a budget of $20,000 for something. Let's say that there is going to be a decrease in your budget by 5% on each item. Now you have training, for example, training was $4,000. Now the 5% you have to give up. Calculate how much you have to give up, on what the difference is here that you have to give up. So what you do is you do the equal sign and you take this number, training, the value, times the percentage that you have to give up. And then you hit enter. So you have to give up $200. Now notice what happens, that if I drag this down, I get very large numbers. On the second cell here, on D7, I don't get anything. But on the other ones, you'll notice in a moment that you'll get very large values. And by the way, anytime you see these number signs here, that means that column, it's not wide enough. So what you have to do is go here to the top and move it to the right. Or another trick here is to double click between the columns, and it will make it exactly at the widest point. Now your question would be, well, why do I have on travel, I had only $2,000 budget, but now somehow the difference is $10 million. The reason for that is because notice what's being calculated. It's calculating C, so C11 right here, times C9. Because what's happening is, as it's moving down, when we did the autofill, as the autofill was moving down, it shifted one down automatically. So if we go here, it was C7 and C5. So 100 times 0 is 0. The next one, it got 8,000 times 4,000 is 32 million, and so on. So what we need to figure out here is we need to use what's called an absolute reference. So we delete all this stuff. And by the way, this is one of the difficult concepts to explain, but this is important and we need to know it. So on the absolute reference here, what we do is that we go and change the C4. Remember, we said that if you see this C4, that's a relative reference. If you see it with the dollar signs, that's an absolute reference. There is also a third type of reference. So you have the relative, and the relative references would be, for example, C4. Absolute, that'll be dollar sign C, dollar sign 4. And then you also have what's called mixed references. And mixed reference is when one piece, either the column or the row, is the one that is locked. So it could be, for example, C dollar sign 4 or dollar sign C 4. So either one of those. So in our case here, we're going to go back here, and we want to, because we have one point of reference, so we want to lock this. So that means it will have both dollar signs in the reference. So we do C6, which is this guy, times 5%. Now, you can either type the dollar signs manually there, or you can press F4 in Excel and it will put the dollar signs automatically for you. If you push F4 again, it will change it to a mixed reference that I just explained a moment ago, or the other variation here of the mixed reference, and then you tap it again one more time. That will take you to the relative reference. What we want in our case is the absolute reference. Hit enter. Now drag it down and notice that our calculations are correct. Now you'd say, why would I want to go through all of this trouble? The reason for that is because the economy is doing worse. And what you do is, the boss comes along and says, there's going to be a decrease of 7%. You simply type 7 right there. Everything gets updated automatically. Let's say that you're planning on something or giving a raise to your employees or a percentage. It's going to be, instead of 7%, it's going to be 9% or whatever it may be. You just change one value in one place, and then all references to that value get updated automatically. So it's a very important concept. It's very important to use. You'll find uses for it in business, and it's very important to remember how to do this. Now, before we actually leave here a moment, let's explain a little bit the mixed references. On the mixed references, well, you'd use those if you have a bunch of those values or key values that you would modify, and those could be either in a row or in a column. Now, if you want to lock them down by that specific row, what you'd do is you'd simply lock down the row portion of it. So it would be this first one, the C $4. So you're locking in that specific row. If you wanted to lock the column, depending on where the column is, then, or what the values in that column are, then you'd lock it will be the second instance here. So the $C and then 4, because you're allowing the rows to change but not the columns. So let's try it here. So let's change this to a mixed reference. We press F4. So now we are locking it by the row, just 4. So when we scroll down, the values should not change, and we'll notice here that it will work. It will basically stay the same because we have one value. If I hit enter, notice it's 360. If I do the autofill, it should work, so it stays the same. If I went and changed the formula the other way around, so what that does is that we locked it by the row. Now if I go this way, however, notice I'll get a no value. The reason for that is because it's calculating here D6, this value, by the next one, because we did not lock the column, we locked just the row here. So if we wanted that, so let's say we had 5% here, then notice it's taking D6, this one, and it's moving one to the right. So it's doing 360 times 5 and giving us a high value. So that's not what we want. So now let's go ahead and change this first reference here to a mixed reference, but having the $sign in front of C. So we do F4 and then hit enter. So if I go to the right, it moved to the right. However, if I go down here, again, it's not going to work, because again, we are not locking the rows. It's changing on the rows, so it's just moving one down because the rows didn't get locked down. So most likely you'll not use quite as much the mixed references. However, you'll use mostly the absolute references where you're locking to one point and that's it. So the important concept here is to use their relative references that you most commonly use. There are absolute references with both $signs where you are locking on a special, in a particular cell location. And then you're using mixed references where you're locking either the column or the row. Welcome back to Excel. At this point, I'm going to cover a couple of the things as far as formatting of a worksheet before I move into data filtering and sorting and other types of functionality in Excel. So formatting, there are a couple easy ways here. Basically, there are styles that you can use in a spreadsheet. You can format the whole area of a bunch of cells together, or you can format the actual values within a cell. The formatting of the values within a cell, let's say, let me do this first. You want to increase the decimal points. For example, for financial calculations, you might go up to 5 decimal points. And that's where you do this, increase the decimal points by using these buttons here under number. And of course, you can do that for a whole bunch of numbers or a whole range. There are different types of formatting that you can apply. You can select the whole range that you want to format, and then you could choose this option here for format as a table and pick any of them that you prefer basically. And notice, instead of you spending all afternoon formatting this has been formatted automatically for you. So let me go ahead and undo this. And by the way, if you change your mind, you can go and pick something else from here. So just remember, it's very easy. Just go under the styles here and apply a style. There are also cell styles that you can apply. The cell styles, it's basically selecting a specific cell or a specific range of cells and then applying a particular format to it. Another thing that you can do is you can do what's called conditional formatting. The conditional formatting, it can be based on the values within those cells. So let's say we're going to apply to this, we're going to format this as a table, and let's say at this point we want to take these values within this table or with this range and then represent those values in some kind of conditional type of formatting. So let's say we want to point out all the values that are below average. So you go under conditional formatting, so we have selected the range here, you click on conditional formatting and then you choose for example, the top bottom rules, above average or below average. So we want it below average, so we pick below average, and then you can choose the type of color that you want to pick for it, and then you click OK. Now notice anything that is below average, it's been highlighted in that specific color. So if I change this to 455, notice that color will be adjusted automatically. Let me undo this. Now you can also do different other types of formatting. So for example, you want to see the top 10% or the top 10 items. So let's say the top 10%. You just select it. You can customize the percentage as well and click OK. So those are the top 10%. So this can come in very handy to point out certain types of data or customers out there that you are evaluating or data that you are analyzing. Let me go back to conditional formatting here, and you can do highlight, for example, anything below a certain threshold. So you say anything less than $20. Click OK. Actually, let me undo the first conditional formatting here, and then we choose anything less than 25. And notice anything less than that, it's pointed out. Under conditional formatting, you can use what's called the data bars, and this is actually pretty neat. So the higher the value here, the higher the bar represented. And this would come in very handy in business when you're presenting data and a report. The icon sets, it's another one, or you can create new rules for yourself. In this section, I'm going to cover how do you calculate percentages in Excel. So for example, let's say that we have $1,000 that we invested in some kind of fund. At the end of the year, let's say we made $1,200. It's hard to make that much money anymore, but let's say we did. We are going to format this as accounting dollar amounts. Now in this area here, let's say we want to calculate the percentages, so we'll format that as percentage. The idea here would be take number 2 minus number 1. So what the statement was at the end of the year minus what you invested in the beginning of the year divided by what you invested in the beginning of the year. So it would be basically 1200 minus 100 divided by 1000, or 1200 minus 1000 divided by 1000. So to express this in a formula, it would be the equal sign number 2. Actually, we have to do this in parentheses. So number 2, if you remember your basic math, minus the number 1, close parentheses, divided by the first number, and then hit enter. So notice we had a 20% profit. Again, the reason why it gave us the 20% was because I formatted it first with a percentage amount. Now if we had, for example, $4,000 and at the end of the year we had 3,800, and we want to find the percentage here, we could either do this manually again, equal, open parentheses, number 2 minus number 1, close parentheses, divided by the first number, and then hit enter. So we lost 5%. Or we could simply use the autofill feature and drag this down. Notice it's giving us an error here on the third one. That's because we don't have any numbers here. So if we had, for example, 6,000 and then 6,500, now notice we made 8%. So to format these values, and by the way, the best way to learn about this stuff is basically explore the program and see what it does and what the features are. So let's say we want to format the negative values in red here. You can select these cells and then right click and choose Format Cells. Under Format Cells, you have all kinds of options here. So you can choose under Number, you can pick how you want to represent the negative numbers. So for example, negative numbers, you could represent them in red or in parentheses right here. So if let's say I wanted them in parentheses, click OK. Now notice it's coming as 0 here. The reason is because I don't have those decimal points. See, if I increase the decimal points to 2 of them, then I have a 5% decrease. Now the reason, if you notice, because we tinkered with the formatting of these cells, if we want to change them into percentages, you can select those and choose percent, and it will give you the percentage change. In this session, I'm going to cover some of the basic concepts on data sorting and data filtering. So let's suppose that you have a bunch of data in a spreadsheet, and it could be stuff like this. So it could be a bunch of records very similar to this. So you have a bunch of dates, you have a bunch of locations or products and regions and customer sales and cost of goods sold and all that type of stuff. If you look at the dates here, they are not in order. So let's say you want to order them by the date. So what you can do in Excel, and a lot of people get confused by this, they start selecting stuff and so on. And let's say you want to sort this by date. All you have to do is you click on one of those cells here that you want to sort by, and then you choose under Sort and Filter, you can choose Sort from the oldest to the newest, or the newest to the oldest, or A through Z and so on. So if I click on the first one, notice everything is sorted at this point, including the other columns. So again, if I wanted to sort by product, for example, click on the product column anywhere and choose Sort A through Z. And now I have them sorted. So that's how easy it is to. In order, the next concept that I'd like to show you is how to filter by a specific product or a specific region. So let's say we want to see the sales by a specific region. Let's say we want only the products for the South region. So of course you could sort this by clicking on region here and choose Sort A through Z. But let's say I don't want these other records here, the West and the South and so on. So what you can do is you can click on Sort and Filter and then choose Filter, or you can right click and choose Filter. So anytime you don't see the function in the toolbar or in the ribbon here, you can also right click on stuff. So let's go back to Sort and Filter and then click on Filter. Notice what happens in Excel. And this is a pretty neat feature starting with Excel 2007. You can go here under, there are these drop-down menus or drop-downs next to each heading on your worksheet here. So you click on the drop-down and notice that all of those are selected. Now we choose Unselect All and we choose only the East section. Now we click OK and notice we'll see only the data for the East. It's not deleted, it's just filtered and displaying only the data for that region. So you can do multiple layers of filtering. So let's say we wanted to filter by region and then also by the sales rep. So you go here on the drop down and you choose, let's say I want only Franks. Click OK. And now these are the results only for Franks. And of course you could sort them again in a different way here. So we have here sorting applied and also we have filtering. Now to unsort them by that specific record, you just go into it and then you get rid of the filtering. So you choose Select All, and of course you can select more than one person too. And now you have more records. You go back here under the range, click OK, and now all the records are displayed again. Keep in mind that under the filtering, there are different other text filters that you can apply as well. So you could say if it begins with something, if it equals something, or if it contains something, or you can even create your custom filter as well. So for example, let's say I want any text filters, let's say, that contain E. It begins with E. And then click OK. And now notice it gives you all the variations of E. So it's a very powerful tool in analyzing data and filtering and sorting through data. And you could have millions of, well, actually up to 1 million records. You can't have more than 1 million in an Excel spreadsheet, but you can sort that data and manipulate it and look at it from different angles and different fields and filter through it. So to clear the filter, you just drop down here and click on Clear Filter.